Salve te omnes! Welcome back. This video will cover the last 29 lines, 30 lines, of the first portion of Aeneid Book 1 following the AP syllabus. So we're going from lines 180 to 209, and our primary focus in this episode, in these lines, is Aeneas. There he is. We have seen him before when the storm first hit. We saw him praying, wishing that he were dead. So not a terribly heroic figure was cut back then. But now we're going to see him in a much different light now that they've landed. We're going to see him much more as a leader, and that will actually be the topic of an analytical video to follow, talking about episodes of leadership in the Aeneid and times that we see characters acting as good and potentially bad leaders. This scene in particular is a great example of that. So let's dive in, go through the text, and talk about what's going on. So Aeneas, right? We just left off, the Trojans had just landed, and the men had started some fires and were gathering what grain they could recover from the ships because it had been soaked by the seawater, so a lot of it was probably not usable. But they have found some, and they've started roasting it and grinding it to make flour, to make bread, so that they can eat. Aeneas, though, Aeneas is not part of that group. He is not down there making bread and starting fires. Instead, in the meanwhile, in Terea, it's delayed over here. So while all that is going on, Aeneas climbed one of the cliffs. Remember, this space that the Trojans have found themselves in had Gemini Scopuli. So there are two cliffs that overlook the ocean. Aeneas climbs one of them and seeks something like all the view. All right, all of the view, the whole view, far and wide. Here's latte again, adverb, far and wide, over the ocean. All right, over the ocean. Technically, your note says this could be a dative of direction, like he's looking towards the ocean, or it could simply be an ablative of place where. There's no way to tell. You have to pick the one that you like the best. But Aeneas seeks the whole view of the ocean, far and wide. Why? If perchance, notice the subjunctives here, all right, so this is a subjunctive here, so if he could see, or if maybe he could see, maybe he might see some Antheus. Now, there's a note explaining what's going on here. This is actually aliquem, because after si, nisi, numen, ne, ali takes a holiday. So the literal translation, which your note tells you, is something like, if any Antheus, if he could see any Antheus, but in English we would simply say, if he could see anything of Antheus, like any evidence of Antheus. All right, and this is another one of his captains who has been lost, apparently, because Aeneas is out looking for him. Antheus had been tossed by the wind, as they all had. This Anthea, by the way, your note tells you, this is actually a Greek accusative form, so don't get too worked up about the A there. And his Phrygian biremes. All right, so Antheus was a captain of some men who were Phrygians, and they were on biremes. Aeneas wanted to see if he could see anything of Antheus or Cappius. All right, he wants to see if there's Capus out there somewhere, or, and then again the third element in the tricolon, because we have three people, Antheus, Cappius, and Caicus. The third element is always a little different. If he could see the arms of Caicus on his lofty stern, so on his lofty ships. Remember, the poupes can simply stand in Virgil for naves. So Celsis in navibus, we might as well say. And this, of course, is referring to something like the flags, all right, or the signs of Caicus. All right, he's not looking for a sword or anything like that. He's looking for the flags of Caicus, the symbols of Caicus. Unfortunately, navem in conspectu nullam. In his sight, no ship. On the other hand, though, tris litere cervos, on the shore, 3 stags he saw. And this is Aeneas again, so Aeneas is still the subject. He saw wandering, right? A lovely present participle right here. Your note also points out that there's a lovely chiasmus in this line with navem nullam, tris cervos, and if you're confused about how that forms a chiasmus, it is the noun and the adjective, and then the adjective and the noun. So perhaps not immediately obvious as a chiasmus, but it is in fact a chiasmus. Hos, which is the cervos, the stags, Tota armenta secuntur. So the whole herd followed them. Tergo, something like at the back, but we would just say behind. And through the valleys, the long line, again, this is a marching line, fed or is feeding. So he sees some stags leading a whole flock of deer, a whole herd of deer, just noshing, right? Having a snack through the valley. Okay, so having seen the deer, what does he do? Well, Aeneas, who is still the subject, by the way, Aeneas stopped here. This eye is long, so he stopped here, and his bow in his hand, or with his hand, and his swift arrows, corripuit, he grabbed. So he grabs his bow and his arrows with his hand. Tela quae, now this is interesting right here. So the tela is referring to the arcum and the sagittas, but it is buried inside the relative clause that is describing them. So his bow and arrows are the weapons which faithful Achates, remember Achates, he was starting the fire earlier, was carrying. So Achates has apparently gone with Aeneas to look for people because Achates is Phaedus. He is faithful. He is Aeneas' right-hand man. And he's carrying the weapons for his lord. And, so moving on now that Aeneas has his weapons, and this is Aeneas, he laid low, okay, first the very leaders. These would be the cervos, these are the stags. And then we have this lovely phrase right here. So everything from capita alta to arbores is describing the ductores. So we can begin with ferentes, which is most directly modifying the ductores. These leaders, these stags, were bearing, and then this right here, capita alta, okay? This right here is where they are bearing them. They are or what they're bearing, excuse me. They are bearing their heads high. All right, so this alta is high. It could be tall, but, you know, bearing their heads high with, all right, cornes, this is an ablative of quality. So this is a quality that their heads possess. What quality does their head possess? Tree-like horns. Okay, so again, these are stags, they have horns, they have antlers, I should say, and they are tree-like. So these are big bucks, all right? These are 12, 14-point bucks. These are big deer. He lays them out. This is Aeneas. He lays them out first, and then, still staring it, he lays out the herd, all right, the crowd. So first he targets the leaders, then he targets the other deer, and he misket omnem turbam, another hyperbaton. Look at that, omnem and turbam. He confuses, he mixes up the whole herd, driving them, this is Aeneas, this is still Aeneas, driving them among the leafy forests or groves, nemus, we saw the nemus in the scene before, with his weapons. Now, not spears, obviously, because we're talking about sagittas up here. These are arrows, but again, tela can be any kind of thrown weapon. So he drives them through the leafy wood with his spears, right, because the deer are fleeing his attack. So Aeneas is shooting deer and laying them low. Now, this is also a little bit broken up here. There's some notes here. There's prius quam, right? Prius quam is actually another instance of timesis, all right? So the word is prius quam, but it's been cut, which is what timesis means, into its two separate elements. So what we do is we hold off on this prius for a second. We're going to put it back over here with quam in our mind. So Aeneas did not stop prius quam before, or we might say until, this is Aeneas as the winner, because Aeneas won in the fight between Aeneas and the deer, he won. As the winner, he poured out 7 huge bodies upon the earth. Ablative, right? I stem. And he equaled the number of bodies with his ships. So Aeneas shoots 7 deer because he has 7 ships. So each ship is going to get a deer, and everyone is going to eat well tonight. All right, let's scroll down to the rest of this. So having killed these deer, what does Aeneas do? Well, he petit portum. So literally he seeks the harbor. He goes back to the harbor where the ships are. And he divides the deer, the corpora, among all his allies. So he shares out the meat. And then we have, because it's not enough to have meat, you have to have vina. Now, the note here does, I think, a very nice job of sort of breaking down the rather convoluted structure here of these two lines, but let me just start by saying vina is the object of dividit. So we're still talking about Aeneas. Aeneas brought the beasts back and divided them up among his allies, and then he shared the wine. That's what he did. Everything else from bonus to heros is talking about the wine. So let's talk about the wine. The wine which, all right, Acestes. Now, who is Acestes? Well, he is bonus, he is good Acestes, and he is also heros. He is also a hero. Now, the note explains briefly who Acestes is. He is somebody that we will see later. He had entertained Aeneas and his comrades the year before as they were traveling. Aeneas had stumbled upon him, and as they were leaving, which we'll come to right here, as they were leaving, Acestes had given them, right here, this wine. So it is the wine which good Acestes had loaded, onererat, had loaded into jars, okay, on the shores of Sicily. Remember, they had just come from Sicily. And the hero had given it to the Trojans. These are the Trojans, Aeneas and his men, as they were departing. So this wine has been with them now for a while, and it has survived. And what did Aeneas do? He shared the wine. And he mulket, and this is a good word, he softened his Trojans, his men's grieving hearts, marentia pectora, dictis, with his words, an ablative of means. So Aeneas is about to speak and uses words to calm their grieving hearts. When did we last see someone using words to calm hearts that were upset or affected in some way? Could it have been that epic simile up above? But that will be further discussed in a analysis video. For now, let's continue on with what Aeneas has to say. Okay, so here is Aeneas's speech to his men. It is a justly famous speech, and it contains one of the most famous lines in the entire epic, right down here. But we'll get there. So he starts off addressing his men as Sokii, allies, all right, which they were mentioned, they were described as Sokios up above when he was sharing out the deer. But it's also worth noting that they're not quite amici. They're kind of a little bit more, but not at the same time. But they are equals to Aeneas. Oh, friends, we might just as well say. And then he starts, he interrupts his speech, because this is vocative, so he's addressing them. But then he interrupts his address to say something to them, right? What has made these men so key? Remember, Aeneas is effectively the king of Troy at this point. That's how Juno described him before, the king of Troy. And he is descended from a goddess, so he already has a bit of a leg up on everyone else. And yet he calls these Trojans who are traveling with him his friends. Well, why is that? Well, he says right here, for we are not, neque, we are not ignorant of previous evils. This ante is adverbial, and it's easier in translating to sort of put it with malorum, right? We are not unaware of evils before now. So we have suffered together. All right, we have suffered bad things before now. So this is not their first time facing hardship. And sure enough, he continues on that theme right here. O passi graviora. So passi is the participle from the verb patior, which being deponent makes this a perfect active participle. So, O you who have suffered graviora, worse things. So apparently this, with all of the nightmarishness that goes along with it, is actually not the worst thing that they have suffered, according to Aeneas. And then he moves on to say just a simple statement, Deus dabit finem, his quoque. God, whether this is Jupiter or the gods collectively is not really important, God will give an end to these things, plural and dative, to these things as well. So it's not going to be like this always. And then he goes on to talk about how he just mentioned that they had suffered really, really bad things. Well, in these two lines right here, 3 lines even, he talks about some of those bad things that he and his men have suffered. You all have approached, Acestes, you all have approached the madness of Scylla. And, well, you could say both. You all have approached both the madness of Scylla and the rocks that echo deeply. Penitus is an adverb. It is not a nominative adjective. It is an adverb. So, and it goes with sonantis, the participle. The rocks echoing deeply. So, Scylla is Scylla, and the deep echoing rocks are Charybdis. Okay, so there's that callback to Odysseus and the Odyssey. You all are also experti. Now, this is what's missing here is the verb estis. Okay, experti estis. So I suppose a little oversight there. We should fix that up as our verb, even though technically, if you want to be technical about it, it is also at the same time our subject in a way, because it is describing y'alls. It is the participle. All that's missing is estis. So you all are experienced or have experienced the Cyclopean rocks, the rocks of the Cyclops. And of course, thinking back to your Odyssey, this is Polyphemus, who is now blind, but Aeneas landed on his island and got some rocks thrown at him for his trouble, just like Odysseus. So you all have suffered very, very bad and mythologically significant things. And now here is his advice. Revocate animos, maestumque timorem mittite. Call back your hearts, or your spirits, or something like that. Call back your spirits and send away sad fear. Right? Cheer up, guys. And then again, this very, very famous line right here, he ends this call to his men to cheer up by saying, perhaps one day it will be pleasing. This is an impersonal verb. There is no subject. It will be pleasing to remember, meminisse, this is the infinitive of meminisse, to remember, even, because this is not connecting anything. There is no connection here. So this is et meaning even hike these things. And hike is technically the object of meminisse, which has its own grammatical things going on, because typically in Latin we remember things in the genitive, but whatever. Perhaps one day it will be pleasant to remember even these things, right? One day we'll all look back on this and laugh. So, moving on to the rest of his speech and to the end of this section, Aeneas continues on. Through all kinds of misfortunes, right, all different sorts, varios, through so many, something like challenges or tests or crises of things. Here's that rerum again. Remember, the Trojans were feci rerum. They were just tired of all of their misfortunes. Through so many challenges of bad luck, we are tendimus, we are aiming, we are going to Latium, right? We are still making progress. Latium where, ubi picks up off of Latium, where fate, technically this is plural, but again, poetry, so you can say fate or you can say the fates if you like. Where fate shows us, that's understood, nobis is missing, where fate shows us quiet seats, a quiet place to rest, right? Sedes, of course, doesn't just mean a chair, it means a home, right? Somewhere where you can sit down and rest and be still. Ilik, in that place, again, Latium, where the fates have revealed or are revealing quiet seats for us, Fas, and you have to throw the est in there, it's missing. Fas est, it is right. And then the rest of this right here, regna resurgere Troiae, is basically functioning as an indirect statement. So regna is accusative as the subject of resurgere. So it is right that the kingdom of Troy be born again, grow again, rise again, right? So Troy will rise again in Latium. Fas. It is divinely ordained. And so the last thing that Aeneas has to say to his men is durate. Endure. Toughen up. And servate. Servate vos met. This met is one of the rare instances of a Latin suffix. Stick it on to vos, and what it does is it intensifies the verb. The pronoun. You could say ego met. You could say temet. You could say semet. In this case, it's vos met. Preserve yourselves. Save yourselves for better things. Again, this idea of secundis, meaning second or following, from the verb sequor, means something that will help you, something that will push you along from behind and make your journey easier, like a following wind if you're sailing. So save yourself for better things. This basically means better. Aeneas is done. The last two lines, though, reveal something very interesting about Aeneas. Such words with his voice he gave forth. So he speaks such words with his voice. Again, Talia is hiding a verba. And this is Aeneas right here. Sick with huge cares, concerns, worries. He fakes hope with his face. He presses down the deep grief in his heart. So we see that not only, there's chiasmus happening here. Obviously, this whole line is very chiastic. There's a syndeton right here. There's no connection. There's no et, no que, no sed. We have to just understand it. But this reveals that, in fact, everything Aeneas has just said, from his perspective anyway, is just putting on a happy face, because he himself is sick with huge cares. He's incredibly worried, and so he fakes hope while he presses down. He hides his suffering in his heart. Okay, voltu or voltu here, an ablative of means, right? He's faking his hope with his face, with his expression. And then corde, ablative of place where. He is burying his grief in his heart. And that concludes the first portion of Book 1 of the Aeneid on the AP syllabus, lines 1 through 209. When we come back, we will jump about 200 lines and pick up on line 418 in the next video. Walete!